Here today. Next, we'll have Michael Borges, New York State Association of School Business Officials. He'll be followed by Elliot Garcia.
Good afternoon or good evening, depending whether you're a half-class or half-full person. I'm Mike Borges from the Association of School Business Officials. Thank you, Chair Weinstein and members of the committee for allowing me to speak tonight, or this afternoon. I have a PowerPoint, it's very brief. I'll just go through the main points of it. First thing first is that the governor's proposed $338 million increase in foundation aid is woefully inadequate. It only represents an 8% reduction in the $4.2 billion that's owed in foundation aid, and at this rate, it would take somewhere between 12 and 14 years for the phase-in to fully go into effect. Although the distribution of the foundation aid is a good start, we think it's not enough. Currently, with the governor's proposal, only 51% of the high-need suburban districts we get 25% of their overall foundation aid still due. So a lot has remained unchanged in the foundation aid, and we need to have it fully funded. As you can see from the next chart, the high-need urban and suburban school districts are the furthest from full funding for the foundation aid. They are currently, with the governor's proposal, still only at 68% of their foundation aid and are owed the most. And you can see from the next chart, the 23 school districts in the state that are owed a combined $766 million in foundation aid, which is 35% of the overall foundation aid still due to school districts outside the Big Five. And that's a pretty substantial amount of money that's owed. Many of them are small city school districts as well. One of the reasons why the governor's proposed foundation aid increase is inadequate is that we have increasing student need. Some of our colleagues have mentioned in the past, this evening, that we've had increases in high-need students. Our association released 3 different reports over the fall documenting the growth of poverty in students, documenting the growth of special needs students, and documenting the growth of English language learners, all high-need students, which cost school districts more money to educate. So that's one good reason why the governor's proposal is inadequate. The other one is, as you can see from the chart there, you can see the increases in percentage-wise in terms of students with disabilities and English language learners. But our costs continue to rise. On page 8, you see that our teacher retirement costs have increased by 47% over the 5 years. Our healthcare costs have increased by 21%, fringe benefits by 9%, and all the state aid has increased by 21%. So you can see how our costs are actually rising higher than the state aid increases. And just today, TRS came out confirming that the rate increase for 2018, not 2019 school year, will be 10.63%. That will cost school districts approximately $170 million in that school year, which amounts to 50% of the governor's proposed foundation aid. So you can just lop off 170 off the 338, and you're not left very much. The other problem is that the governor's proposal not only is inadequate, but shifts costs to local school districts. As you can see from the pie chart on page 10, 10 years ago, state aid represented, or local government, or local property taxes represented 51% of school revenue. Now it's 55%. The state has shifted more and more of our costs to the local property taxpayers. And Assemblyman Murray had talked about mandate relief and how we can address that with the tax cap, and I'll get to that. As you can see, the governor's proposal also shifts a lot of the categorical aids, the expense-based aids, to localities by putting a 2% cap on building aid, transportation, BOCES, and also reconfiguring the summer special education program. We estimate that the total cost shift will be $184 million. So that is significant. Between inadequate aid and cost shifting, this is a very costly budget for local taxpayers. And we believe the governor is on this path, on a slippery path, I think, in overreaching Albany's control over what school districts do. Not only does he increase community schools funding by from $150 million to $200 million, basically what he's doing, he's carving out foundation aid and telling school districts how to spend what was typically unrestricted aid. School districts want more flexibility, not less, in how they allocate and how they distribute their funding. And again, the governor's proposal lacks any kind of mandate relief or flexibility in how we spend our money. So it's woefully inadequate in the sense of the amount of money and not recognizing our increasing costs or providing us ways to reduce our costs. So we have a bunch of suggestions about how to do it better in terms of realizing the promise of foundation aid, fully funding foundation aid over a set period of time, using better information, using more updated information, removing the caps. Our foundation aid task force in 2016 had a bunch of recommendations about how to make the foundation aid more workable. Again, on page 16, we list a whole bunch of ideas about how to make our costs less, how to reduce expenses for school districts. Because if you can't give us the sufficient amount of money, then perhaps there are ways you can reduce our expenses. Either way, that will save taxpayers additional taxes. And then one of the other things we wanted to point out also, I think that Julie pointed out as well from the school boards, was that we're working with about 12 school districts looking for building aid amnesty. For various reasons, errors in reporting or errors in documentation, they're losing out on approximately $76 million in building aid due to penalties that are being imposed by the State Education Department. We're looking both for the Senate and the Assembly to deal with that in their budget proposals. Also, the governor eliminates prior year adjustments. For those of you who don't know, prior year adjustments are money that's already owed to school districts from previous years. As far as we can tell, there's about $334 million owed in prior year adjustments. The governor plans on wiping that out going forward. We think that's a major mistake. Again, it's a big cost shift for school districts. At the rate we're going now, it would take about, 19 years to pay off the $334 million.
Can you?
I'm wrapping up.
Yeah.
And one last thing, farm to school. One of the good things in the governor's budget is he proposes more funding for school districts to buy locally produced goods from farmers. We want 25 cents. He proposes 30 cents. We want to include dairy. So I think that's one of the good things. And overall, I think that in summation, the executive budget fails to provide adequate funding to meet rising costs and the growth of high-need students, fails to deliver on any mandate relief or cost-saving measures that will reduce the property tax burden, and instead shifts costs from the state to local property taxpayers and continues a troubling trend in micromanaging school spending. Thank you.